Imagine a quiet village hidden among the mountains of Japan, where nature hugs each house with gentle care. Tall trees sway to the rhythm of the soft wind, and the river whispers ancient stories as it winds through the village. It was here, in this serene setting, that Haruto lived, a young farmer. Haruto was known for his kindness and simplicity. Every day, he worked in his fields with a smile on his face, tending to the land with the same dedication his family had for generations. His life was calm, marked by a comfortable and predictable routine. He woke up at sunrise, worked until noon, and spent his afternoons helping his neighbors or simply gazing at the distant mountains. At first glance, it seemed like Haruto had everything he could wish for. However, behind that gentle smile, there was a constant feeling that something was missing, a quiet restlessness that he couldn't understand. Haruto loved his village and the people who lived there. But as the days passed, he felt a growing emptiness, an unanswered question that followed him like a shadow. He wondered if there was something beyond the mountains, something that could fill the space in his heart that he could barely name. And so, we begin our journey with Haruto, seeking to understand this restlessness that compelled him to look beyond the horizon, to search for a deeper meaning in his existence. Although Haruto had a peaceful life and a stable routine, the restlessness inside him grew every day. At night, when he lay down, he felt an unexplainable emptiness. It was as if there was a whispering voice in the back of his mind, a voice he couldn't quite hear clearly. During his work in the fields, he found himself gazing at the distant mountains, wondering what could lie beyond them. Haruto talked to the elders of the village, seeking advice and stories of wisdom. They spoke of traditions and customs, but none seemed to touch on the depth of what Haruto was feeling. Even during festivities, when the village filled with laughter and music, he couldn't shake the feeling that something essential was missing in his life. He tried to ignore this restlessness by immersing himself deeper in his work, helping his neighbors with even greater dedication. However, the more he tried to fill the void with daily activities, the more intense the sense of lack became. With every sunset, when the golden light painted the fields and mountains, Haruto felt a silent calling, an urgent need to find answers that he could no longer ignore. It was during this time of deep introspection that Haruto heard about an old Zen monk who lived in a secluded temple at the top of the mountain. They said the monk possessed ancient and profound wisdom, capable of illuminating even the most hidden questions of the heart. Haruto felt a spark of hope, a possibility that perhaps, just perhaps, he could find what he had been searching for. During a conversation at the village market, Haruto first heard about the old monk. A group of elders spoke about the wisdom and serenity the monk emanated, and how he had helped many find inner peace. Haruto's eyes sparkled with a mix of curiosity and hope as he listened to these stories. Could this monk have the answers he was searching for? That night, lying beneath the starry sky, Haruto reflected on what he had heard. He felt a growing desire to visit the temple, to seek guidance from the monk. The idea of leaving his comfortable routine and facing an uncertain journey scared him, but the promise of finding peace and answers was irresistible. The following days were marked by internal conflict. Haruto wondered if he should truly leave everything behind in pursuit of something so uncertain. He thought about his family, his neighbors, and the responsibilities he had in the village. But the restlessness inside him did not diminish, on the contrary, it grew stronger and became impossible to ignore. Finally, after many nights of reflection, Haruto made a decision. He packed a small bag with some supplies and clothes, prepared his farm to be absent for a few days, and at dawn, he set off towards the mountains. Each step he took was driven by the hope that, by finding the old monk, he could finally understand the inner voice that called to him incessantly. Haruto's journey began before dawn, when the village was still wrapped in silence. He looked one last time at the sleeping houses and felt a mix of anxiety and determination. With his light backpack on his back, he started up the trail that led into the mountains, feeling the morning cold bite his skin. The trail was steep and rocky, and each step demanded more effort than Haruto had imagined. At first, the excitement of the journey kept his spirits high, but as the day progressed, fatigue began to set in. He wondered if he had made the right choice, if finding the monk would really bring him the answers he sought. As he climbed, Haruto passed through dense forests, crossed icy streams, and faced strong winds that seemed to test him at every turn. The landscape, though challenging, also offered moments of beauty and reflection. He observed the nature around him, noticing details he had never seen before. Every bird, every leaf seemed to whisper ancient secrets. But the path also brought doubts. At several points, Haruto thought about giving up, about returning to the safety of his village. He felt exhausted, his feet hurt, and the trail seemed endless. However, whenever doubt overtook him, that inner voice, the same one that had driven him to begin this journey, encouraged him to keep going. Finally, after hours of arduous walking, Haruto spotted the temple in the distance, a simple yet majestic structure amidst the vastness of the mountains. The sight of the temple renewed his strength. With firmer steps, he continued on, determined to find the monk and, perhaps, discover the answers he had been searching for. As Haruto approached the temple, the trail became steeper and more challenging. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. Fatigue weighed heavily on his shoulders, and his legs felt like they were made of lead, but the sight of the temple growing closer gave him strength to continue. At one point, Haruto reached a particularly difficult stretch of the trail where large rocks blocked the path and required careful climbing. His hands became scratched and dirty, and sweat dripped down his face. Each movement was accompanied by sharp pain, but he knew he was too close to give up now. While climbing the last rock, Haruto lost his balance for a moment and nearly fell. His heart raced, and for a brief instant, fear overtook him. However, the same inner voice that had guided him there spoke louder, reminding him of the purpose of his journey. With renewed determination, Haruto managed to regain his footing and continue. Finally, Haruto reached the plateau where the temple was situated. He stood still for a few moments, catching his breath and observing the simple and serene structure before him. The temple seemed to radiate an aura of tranquility, as if it had been there since the beginning of time, waiting for his arrival. With slow and reverent steps, Haruto approached the temple entrance. The gate was partially open, and he could see the inner garden where ancient trees swayed gently in the wind. The sound of a distant bell echoed, creating a soothing melody that seemed to calm his weary soul. Upon crossing the gate, Haruto was greeted by a young acolyte who, with a gentle smile, guided him to a resting area. As he sat down and accepted a bowl of fresh water, Haruto felt a wave of gratitude and relief. He had faced many challenges to get there, but he was finally at the temple, ready to meet the monk and perhaps, finally hear the answers he had been seeking. While Haruto rested and drank the fresh water, the young acolyte quietly left him alone for a few moments. Haruto closed his eyes and took a deep breath, feeling the peace of the temple around him. Every sound, the rustling of leaves, the singing of birds, the gentle ringing of the bell, seemed to relieve the accumulated weariness from his journey. After some time, Haruto heard soft footsteps approaching. He opened his eyes and saw an old monk, serene in appearance with a deep gaze, standing before him. The monk wore a simple robe and his eyes shone with a calm wisdom. With a slight nod, the monk invited Haruto to follow him to the temple garden. In the garden, the monk sat on a wooden bench under an ancient tree, gesturing for Haruto to sit beside him. The atmosphere was calm and inviting, with sunlight filtering through the leaves and creating patterns of shadows on the ground. Haruto immediately felt at ease in the monk's presence, as if he were in the company of an old friend. The monk began to speak, his voice gentle and compassionate. He asked Haruto about his life, his concerns, and what had brought him to the temple. Feeling a genuine connection, Haruto opened his heart and spoke of the restlessness he felt, the emptiness he couldn't fill, and his hope to find answers in the temple. The monk listened attentively, without interrupting, his eyes fixed on Haruto with deep understanding. When Haruto finished speaking, the monk paused, looking at the tree under which they sat today. With a gentle smile, he said, "Haruto, within each of us lies an inner voice, a silent wisdom that we often ignore. This voice is like this tree, silent, yet full of life and knowledge." Haruto looked at the tree, trying to grasp the metaphor. The monk continued, "You have come here seeking answers, but the answers you seek are already within you. What you need to learn is how to listen to that inner voice, how to connect with the wisdom you already possess." The monk's words resonated in Haruto's mind. He felt a mix of confusion and hope, realizing that the journey he had embarked on was not just an external quest, but also an inner journey. The presence of the monk and his words began to illuminate a path that Haruto was still learning to walk. Haruto, absorbing the monk's words, felt a mix of hope and confusion. He desperately wanted to understand how he could hear this inner voice that the monk had mentioned. With a sincere expression, he asked, "But how can I hear this voice? How can I connect with this inner wisdom?" The monk smiled patiently, as if he had expected this question. "Haruto, the inner voice speaks in silence. In our daily lives, we are surrounded by noise, both external and internal. We need to learn to quiet the mind and the heart to hear what it has to say." With that, the monk stood up and invited Haruto to follow him to a quieter corner of the garden, where a small stream flowed peacefully. He pointed to a large rock next to the stream and asked Haruto to sit down. "Close your eyes," the monk said, "and just listen." Haruto obeyed, closing his eyes and focusing on the sounds around him. At first, his mind was filled with thoughts, concerns about the village, doubts about his journey, memories of the past. But gradually, the sounds of nature began to penetrate these thoughts. He heard the gentle murmur of the water, the distant singing of birds, the whisper of leaves in the wind. "Now," the monk continued, "breathe deeply and let each breath calm your mind. Don't force anything, just allow the silence to envelop you." Haruto followed the instructions, breathing deeply and trying to release the accumulated tensions. Gradually, he began to feel an inner peace that he had never experienced before. The restless thoughts began to dissipate, and in their place emerged a sense of clarity and tranquility. After a time that felt both like an instant and an eternity, the monk spoke again, his voice gentle and close. "The inner voice doesn't shout, Haruto. It whispers. In the silence, you will find the answers you seek. This is the first step, learning to be present, to listen with the heart." Haruto opened his eyes, feeling renewed. He knew he still had much to learn, but the experience he had just gone through gave him a new perspective. He realized that the journey was not just physical, but also a profound exploration of his own mind and spirit. And with the monk as his guide, he was willing to follow this path, one step at a time. The monk observed Haruto tenderly, noting the subtle transformation in his expression as he absorbed the words and the experience of the moment. With a calm gesture, he stood up and invited Haruto to walk through the temple garden. As they walked, the monk spoke about the importance of daily meditation practice and inner silence. He explained how the frantic pace of life often obscures our ability to hear our inner voice. "Haruto," said the monk, "the practice of meditation is not just about sitting in silence. It is an act of conscious presence, a moment dedicated to connecting with oneself." As they strolled through the garden, the monk pointed out different elements: a blooming flower, a butterfly gently landing, a small stream flowing leisurely. Each of these details, according to the monk, held lessons about the nature of life and how to live in harmony with oneself and the world around. Haruto absorbed every word with a renewed thirst for knowledge. He realized that the journey to hear his inner voice was not just about seeking specific answers, but also about cultivating a state of being. It was about learning to be present in the here and now, accepting the flow of life with gratitude and serenity. As the sun slowly set on the horizon, Haruto felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. He knew he still had much to learn and explore, but in that moment, he was grateful for the opportunity to be in the temple, learning from the wise monk and opening himself to the possibilities the future could bring. As they returned to the main area of the temple, the monk looked at Haruto with a warm gaze. "Remember, Haruto," he said softly, "the journey to hear your inner voice is continuous. Each day is an opportunity to practice silence, to connect with yourself and the universe around you. Trust the path you are walking." Haruto smiled, feeling blessed to have met the monk and taken this courageous step toward his own inner quest. He knew the journey was just beginning, but he was determined to continue, step by step, toward a deeper understanding of himself and the world. In the days that followed, Haruto immersed himself in the temple's routine. He woke before dawn to join the morning meditation sessions with the other acolytes. Under the monk's guidance, he learned to focus his mind, calm his emotions, and listen more deeply to his inner voice. During the day, he assisted with temple chores, tending the garden, preparing simple meals, and helping wherever needed. Each task was an opportunity to practice mindfulness, to be fully present in the moment. As weeks turned into months, Haruto felt a gradual change within himself. The restlessness that had driven him away from his village began to fade. In its place grew a sense of peace and acceptance. He realized that his quest was not just for clear answers or quick fixes, but for a deeper understanding of himself and his purpose in life. The monk remained a constant and inspiring presence on his journey. He shared stories and teachings that touched Haruto's heart, offering wise guidance for the challenges he faced. Each conversation and moment of shared silence strengthened Haruto's connection to his own inner wisdom. At night, he gazed at the stars in the clear sky above the temple. He reflected on how his life had changed since arriving there, on the lessons he had learned, and on the path still ahead. He felt gratitude for every experience, encounter, and teaching that brought him closer to himself and his true essence. Haruto's journey in the temple was more than a quest for external answers, it was a journey of self-discovery and transformation. He knew that even when he eventually left the temple and returned to his village, he would carry with him the lessons learned and the inner peace he had found there. As Haruto spent more time in the temple, he began to notice changes not just in his mind, but also in his body and spirit. The daily practice of meditation brought a serenity that had once seemed distant to him. He felt more centered, more present in each moment. During one of the morning meditations, while sitting silently with the other acolytes, Haruto had a profound experience of connection with himself and the universe around him. It felt as if he was touching something essential and intangible within himself, a source of peace and wisdom that had always been there, waiting to be discovered. Over the days, the monk continued to guide Haruto on his journey of self-discovery. They talked about Zen Buddhist teachings, about the importance of compassion and acceptance. The monk shared parables and stories that illuminated different aspects of life and human nature, inviting Haruto to deeply reflect on his own experiences and journey. One afternoon, as they walked around the temple grounds, the monk stopped in front of a cherry tree in full bloom. The pink flowers shimmered in the light of the setting sun, creating a landscape of transcendent beauty. The monk looked at Haruto and said serenely, "Just like these flowers, life is ephemeral and precious. Learn to appreciate each moment, each breath." Haruto nodded, absorbing the message in the monk's words. He understood that life was not just about achieving goals or solving problems, but also about cultivating a deep appreciation for the here and now. Each day in the temple was an opportunity for him to reconnect with this essential truth. At night, as he gazed at the starry sky, Haruto felt a deep sense of gratitude and peace. He knew that the journey of self-discovery and spiritual growth was ongoing, but he felt more prepared to face the challenges ahead. With the monk's support and the wisdom he had gained, he was determined to continue his journey with courage and compassion in his heart. As days turned into weeks, Haruto delved deeper into the spiritual practice of the temple. Each morning began with silent meditation, where he surrendered to the gentle flow of his breath and the soft sounds of nature around him. Haruto's mind gradually calmed, finding an inner space where daily worries lost their urgency. During study and reflection sessions with the monk, Haruto explored ancient teachings that outlined paths to inner peace and spiritual enlightenment. He learned about the importance of compassion not only for others but also for oneself, a concept that initially seemed strange to him, but now he was beginning to understand more deeply. Every experience in the temple brought new layers of understanding and insight. Haruto realized that life was not a quest for definite answers, but rather a journey of continuous discovery and learning. He felt a deeper connection with nature and the cycles of life, finding beauty in the small things that had previously gone unnoticed. Walking through the temple's tranquil gardens, Haruto observed the subtle changes of the season. He noticed how tree leaves danced with the wind, how flowers bloomed and withered in their own time. Each moment was a gentle reminder of life's impermanence and the importance of living fully in the present. At night, under the starry sky, Haruto sat alone in contemplation. He reflected on the path he had walked up to that moment and on what was still to come. The spiritual journey in the temple had transformed him in ways he could not have foreseen. He felt more aligned with himself and his purpose, ready to face future challenges with an open heart and a clear mind. Each day in the temple was a gift, an opportunity for Haruto to grow, learn, and connect with his deepest essence. He knew that even when he eventually left the temple to return to the outside world, he would carry with him the precious lessons and inner peace he had discovered there. In the final days at the temple, Haruto devoted himself even more to spiritual practice and silent contemplation. Each moment became an opportunity to deepen his connection with himself and with the sacredness he felt present in every detail of the temple environment. During one of the morning meditation sessions, Haruto experienced a profound state of inner stillness. His mind quieted completely, and he felt immersed in a space of peace and serenity that transcended time and space. It was as if he briefly touched the essence of his own soul, a feeling of unity and completeness that left him amazed. The monk watched Haruto with a peaceful smile, understanding the deep spiritual progress he was achieving. He knew that every spiritual journey was unique and personal, and that Haruto was beginning to discover his own inner truths. As the days at the temple neared their end, Haruto felt a mixture of gratitude and nostalgia. He had found a spiritual home in the temple and in the monk's teachings, and he knew that leaving that place meant saying goodbye not only to a physical environment, but also to a state of mind that he had nurtured with such care and dedication. On the last night, the monk led a simple ceremony to mark Haruto's departure from the temple. Together, they lit candles and recited prayers of gratitude for the shared journey. Haruto felt his heart overflowing with emotion as he expressed sincere thanks to the monk and the other acolytes who had welcomed him with such warmth. At dawn the next day, Haruto bid farewell to the temple with a lump in his throat and a serene smile on his face. He knew that the experience at the temple had left an indelible mark on his heart and soul. He carried with him not only precious memories, but also a renewed sense of purpose and a deeper understanding of himself. As he descended the trail that would take him back to his village, Haruto knew that the spiritual journey that began at the temple was just beginning. He was determined to continue cultivating inner peace, compassion, and wisdom that he had found there. And, most importantly, he was committed to listening to and honoring his inner voice, knowing that it would be his constant guide along the path of life. As Haruto walked back to his village, he carried with him the memories and precious teachings from the temple. Each step on the journey home was an opportunity to reflect on his spiritual path and the transformations he had experienced. As he passed through familiar fields and roads, Haruto noticed how the world around him seemed different now. Colors appeared more vivid, sounds clearer, and he felt a new connection with nature and the people around him. He smiled at neighbors he met along the way, sharing small conversations and gestures of friendship that might have gone unnoticed before. Approaching his village, Haruto felt a mix of anticipation and inner calm. He knew that daily life would bring new challenges and responsibilities, but now he felt more prepared to face them with a clear mind and an open heart. Upon arriving home, Haruto was warmly welcomed by his family and friends. They noticed the change in his demeanor, the serenity that now radiated from him. Haruto shared stories about his experiences at the temple, the lessons he had learned, and how he planned to apply those teachings in his daily life. In the days that followed, Haruto often found himself reminiscing about moments in the temple, deep meditation sessions, inspiring conversations with the monk, and simple moments of connection with nature. He continued to practice meditation daily, aiming to keep alive the flame of inner peace that had been ignited in the temple. At night, under the same starry sky he had contemplated in the temple, Haruto found comfort and inspiration. He knew that the spiritual journey was ongoing, and he was determined to continue his path with courage and compassion. Thus, with a grateful heart and an enlightened mind, Haruto embraced his return to the village as the next chapter in his journey of self-discovery and spiritual growth. He knew that wherever the future would take him, he would carry the blessings and teachings of the temple to guide him on the path of life.